course.
Greetings from our educational courtyard here at Paul Public Charter School, and thank you again for joining us for Are You Listening Season 2, a podcast series in partnership with the wonderful people at Forge Theater. On this episode of Are You Listening, kicking off Season 2, we'll be joined by Kat Thompson, who is the Director of Human Resources at Audi of America. She'll be interviewed by our very own Xavier Tobias, who is our Mr. Junior, part of the Student Government Association. Let's check them out and see what they're talking about.
Thank you so much for joining our podcast. I have a few questions for you, if you don't mind.
Sure. Thank you, Xavier. I'm excited to be here, and I feel truly honored to be able to share a little bit about myself and my role in human resources, and just as a female and a minority in the level of leadership that I hold.
We are glad that you are here. First question. What exactly is human resources?
Human resources. So that's a great question. And especially, I think, for this target audience, because it's not something that's widely known even to most adults until they have to interact with human resources as it pertains to employment. But it's honestly exactly what it says it is. Humans are our most valuable resource. When you think about resources holistically, right, you probably think immediate first thought is probably about natural resources. So like trees, air, water. So the things that you need are essential to survival is what a lot of people think about when they think about resources. But humans, from a social perspective, are the most valuable assets. So you need human beings. We are needed in society to be able to accomplish most things that are considered from a service perspective or just anything job written or driven. We actually execute in that capacity. So as you know, the field of human resources itself can, I think, be summed from a perspective of you're actually kind of the protection of the voice of the human body, whether it pertains to employment or any structural formatting where there's essentially a system in place.
Okay. Thank you. What is one of the best parts of your job?
So human resources, there's different facets to human resources. I think a lot of people think about, I know that I interview with human resources when I get a job, or, they're in charge of maybe hiring and firing of a job. But for me, the most exciting part, or the best part for me, is actual talent development. So actually being able to watch someone's career pathing from the beginning to the middle to the elevation stages of them growing in role. So knowing that, I worked retail for a very long time, and there's a lot in retail that can be afforded to an individual that a lot of people don't even know unless you're on the ins and outs and behind the scenes of actually watching someone possibly start off as a cashier, but maybe end up as a senior vice president of an organization. And I've seen some of those really, really amazing journeys and been an instrumental part of them. So for me, that's the best job, to essentially be able to hire someone who maybe doesn't realize their own potential yet, or hasn't had the opportunity to show what that potential could be. So being a part of those journeys and helping individuals find and shine their light is the best part of my job.
Thank you. Next question. What is one of the biggest challenges of your job?
It is absolutely anything associated with termination. I mean, I've had some of the most ridiculous experiences, and a lot of them, looking back, can be quite laughable. But then some of them can be quite tumultuous and heartbreaking, right? It just depends on the actual scenario and situation within itself. But I will say, whether it's conduct-related termination or performance, I think that I always try to share the lesson within those conversations that I have to have, or I have to support my teams through, because I'm blessed enough to be in a position where I don't have to have a lot of those direct conversations anymore, but I'm actually coaching the leaders that report directly into me on how to have those conversations and how to do it in a safe environment as well. But I will say I'm always conscious of the fact that there's another person on the side of that conversation. who could potentially be impacted from a financial perspective, whether it pertains to taking care of their family and their loved ones or themselves, or who possibly just made a really dumb decision, right? And then what is the lesson behind that I can help them grow outside of? So it's definitely a termination. It's challenging because, you want to be able to do the right thing for an organization or even for that person in that time that they don't see. And it's a necessary evil, if you will, that oftentimes needs to take place to be able to see a potential better outcome in the future for that person or for the organization that you support.
Sounds really hard. Why is college important for students to consider?
It's extremely important for students to consider a college education for a few reasons. I myself was a first generation college student, and I actually went to undergrad for theater. And for a long time, it's what I did. It's what I had a desire to do. But I also think that there was so much self-exploration within those college years, and so much that was poured into me from the village of individuals that I gained as friends, or even from the staff and faculty that impacted me in ways that they potentially didn't even realize, that helped me become the individual that I am today. So those life lessons that I learned at a really young age by being surrounded by like-minded individuals who had desires to become something bigger and better than potentially saw, or to be able to continue maybe a family tradition. I think that having that time where you're kind of outside of your normal environment from your high school years to kind of self-explore and self-develop is instrumental in preparing you for the real world. It kind of puts you in a position where you have to make some independent decisions, where you have some unilateral situations that don't necessarily involve your parents or your guardians, where you're really kind of in charge of your own destiny. And I think it challenges you in a way that prepares you for the real world. So when you're faced with those situations further down the road, you don't draw within or make the wrong decision, or you're better equipped and you have more resources and tools to be able to make the best decision for you and your future.
Thank you.
Outside of the educational.
Right, obviously.
But for me, it's more so about the life lessons and that actual time in which you have to really learn who you are as an individual.
Yeah. What does it mean to protect your brand?
So I love this question. This is a really great question. I'll tell you a story. About 5 years ago, I interviewed for a regional HR position for Walgreens. I had made the decision that I wanted to leave big box retail and I was moving to pharmaceutical sales. And Walgreens interviewed me, and one of the senior vice presidents, he asked me, he said, what is the best brand or the brand that most represents you that you've ever worked for, and why? And I paused, and I'll tell you this, it's always good to pause if you really want to be thoughtful in your response as well, because you want to speak from a genuine place. And I said, I probably took about 2 minutes, and he probably thought I just didn't have an answer, but I was a little bit nervous to answer. And I said, is it okay if I say myself? And he sat back in his chair, and he was like, that's the best answer I've ever heard. And I don't say that from a braggadocious space, but there were 2 lessons for me in that. It's always okay to be genuine and authentic in your response, right? I think people appreciate it, but not only do they appreciate it, you never know how you're going to impact the person who's on the other side of that conversation. But the second thing was it's absolutely okay, and you should be more proud of your self-branding than any other brand association, right? I think we get really excited when a new pair of Jordans come out. We get really excited when the latest AirPods come out or any Apple products. And we're all about brand association nowadays, right? Because anything that has a high level or cost brand behind it for us means good quality. But when I think about branding from a brand perspective, I think about what am I selling when I walk out the door in the morning? Am I smiling, or, am I in the best mental space to engage with individuals, which I do a lot of? Have I done my daily meditation or prayer, whatever it is that sets me on the path to be able to engage with people and present my absolute best foot forward every day. So for me, branding is not only about quality, which I think a lot of people associate with, like if you want a nice car, you want a certain brand of car, a certain luxury type of vehicle, or the other examples that I mentioned earlier, but also your personal brand. Who are you surrounding yourself with, right? What do your peers look like? Because sometimes perception can be reality as it pertains to that. But then how are you carrying yourself? What are you reading? What are you feeding yourself every day to create your own personal brand so that it keeps you in the mindset that you're staying true to your foundation and your morals and your principles?
Thank you. If you could go back in time and give yourself advice in high school, what would you say?
Don't be afraid to take up space. I think that there were some life lessons that I learned later and kind of along the way during my journey that I kind of withdrew from in high school. I was always this very thoughtful, outspoken young lady, and a lot of my friends from college would tell you that, but I don't know how many from high school would say that, because I kind of reserved a lot of who I was, because you probably heard this saying, I was sometimes afraid of, if I shine too bright, am I dimming someone else's light? Don't always raise your hand if you know the answer, right? Like, give somebody else a chance to answer.
Right.
And I learned later in life, it's like, you can absolutely raise your hand every time you know the answer, right? If you get picked on every time, then give the answer if you know it's the right answer, or if you think it's the right answer. And it happens not to be, but don't be afraid to take up space. Fill every room, any space that you can with your positive light and energy, because you never know who you're impacting. You never know who's watching. You never know who you're inspiring. And you taking up space is not necessarily depleting or dimming someone else's light. But if you do it in the proper way, then you're welcoming more light within the room. You're giving others the courage to speak. You're giving others the courage and motivation to want to understand how and why you shine so bright. So never be afraid to take up space. Never be afraid to own who you are holistically and be able to pass and shine that light forward.
All right. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming to speak for our school. It means a lot.
This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Pirate Nation, for inviting me out. I hope to see you guys in person in the future, and I wish you all the best. Thank you, Xavier.
You're welcome. Bye.
We want to take the time to once again thank the wonderful people at Ford's Theater, who of course are major sponsors of our podcast series here at Paul. And of course, another thank you to Kat Thompson, who is the Director of Human Resources at Audi of America. Please stay tuned for episode 2 in season 2 of Are You Listening? Thanks again, and hope to see you soon.